Deep inside the framework of Dakota Prairie's territory files, there are files sealed over 40 by the territorial authorities. Year of the 23 souls who disappeared in the facts of Henrik Olsen and local residents. He always whispers like a devil's step. February 14, 1889, 24 people. He leaves Fort Burford and heads westward towards the colony near the recently created modern Williston. 3 days. After that, I stumbled at the door, frost, fantasy, and just pushed my leather bag and stumbled. Filled with gold coins that did not belong to him. History of wolves, snowstorms, and heroic attempts. I'm happy with the investigator for just 6 weeks to save their companions. A recipient named Ezra Kovadeski discovered something in a distant canyon. All the problems they have thought of, they know survival, loyalty, and the period when a person claims it. It's not him. Before continuing the story of Henrik Olsen and his family who trusted him, please click the subscription button and let us know in the comments what you are listening to in the comments. Because it's a fairy tale. Betrayal in the frozen desert brings you to question each story of border heroism you heard when you heard it. What? Kobarski discovers that in this canyon it is not just about unraveling the secrets of the missing pioneer. It has been revealed that it was calculated. The cruelty even shocked the legislators of the Dakota Territory. Dakota 1889 Territory burst. The promise of electricity in imminent possession and free land in accordance with the laws of succession. Fort Burford, placement. Strategically along the Missouri River, served as the last front post base in front of a vast space of pastures and expanded. Of course, at the Montana border. Here the family gathered the employed supplies. The guide recently made the final medicine before going to territory where neighbors could be 50 miles. In the distance, winter storms were able to fill up to 12 feet of snow overnight. Henrik Olsen has built a reputation from 5 bitter winters. A. Norwegian immigrants who spoke only English with weak accents had the supernatural ability to read. The weather patterns move along the stars when the scenery disappears in the snow. Standing about 6 feet tall, shoulders stretched in the division of wood and transport over the years, Henrik crossed. The Fort Burford trade station has the quiet confidence of a man who has never declined a holiday of the element. It's pale white. The blue eyes seem to catalog all the details. Supply wagon weight, winter clothing quality, tension. The laughter of children experiencing their first Dakota is winter. The family who hired him in February represented him. Dreams and despair moving west. Thomas and Hera Rainen Bergstrom brought 3. Marta Linkvist, the younger girl and Ella Renina's older mother, claimed that she would not die. A local eastern city where free land was expected in the west. Kobarski. Brothers, Yang, Pat and Stanislav brought 3 years of savings. Railway work on the conversion of adjacent areas where they had planned to grow cattle and wheat. Young doctor. Samuel Hartwell traveled with her pregnant wife Rebecca and her boys, transporting medical equipment. A collection of books he plans to use to create the territory of the first correct hospital. Probably Brennan's family. The most persuasive reason to leave civilization behind. Patrick Brennan, a former officer in the Union Cavalry, hoped. Isolation helps her eldest son Michael recover from the fact that the doctor politely called the soldiers' hearts. A. The hands and trembling night horrors that tormented the young man since he came from his conflict with Lakota. Patrick's wife, Catherine, excited her business with the methodological accuracy of a woman who moved her family to 6. In 10 years, we still continue to promise a new start. Henrik studied each family with a professional interest, focusing on their resources, despair, and the majority. It is important to be aware of their confidence. He showed a reasonable price for his service, $50. I hope that the family arrives safely at the inheritance site. It's not. On their side, he realized that Henrik had spent the previous autumn place as something completely different. The goal as a site for inheritance. The morning of February 14th has been revealed. The cold weather has gone down to 0. Unusual warmth for semi-festivals, Henrik assured him. It makes travel easier for customers. The party gathered before sunrise. 6. Family, 23 souls 72 Martha Lindfist, age of 4-year-old daughter Karanina Bergstrom Anna. For years, their guide. Wagons relaxing under the weight of seed grain, agriculture. Equipment, medical supplies, and some valuable personal effects that have experienced ruthless discharges. For living at the border. Henrik downloaded efficiency practice, tarpaulin, his own supplies. A collection of ropes, lantern oils, and family-suggested tools. Emergency repairs. It is hidden under legitimate supplies paved with objects that fulfilled a darker target. A small shovel. As he argued, additional coverings of concern about the emergency, and detailed maps marked with areas where they are. Site. When the party left Fort Buford, after a frozen river west of Missouri, Henrik underlined general success sites and stories of successful owners who captured mercilessly prosperous lives. Pasture. His confidence was contagious. Who even had it in Malta Lindfist? She complained violently about leaving a religious community in Minnesota and began to speak to vegetable hopes. Plant the garden in the spring. Henrik keeps checking the little compass. The route he chose was slightly deviating from the established marker on the path. The family was too busy to take care of them. Children soften the nervous cows and admire the endless space. Neither snow stretches to the horizon. On the second day, I had to see the installed path. In the south, in the colony near modern Williston, Henrik announced that he was experiencing a more direct route. Labels that save you 2 days of travel. The decision seemed logical. Supplies were well experienced. The time remained stable and everyone tried to reach their destination before moving on the next storm system. Through. The label brought them directly to the farthest parts of the small Missouri Bowland. The description of the butte and rocks created a natural barrier to hide what happened from others. World. The storm struck by sudden violence on the third day. This can only be done by the Dakota lizard. For a moment. The party traveled under a cloudy but controlled sky. Next, snow with wind. The decrease in leg and temperature visibility dropped sharply at 20 below zero. Henrik called on the wagon to form a protective circle. Standard procedures for driving through pastures. Rather. Evacuated to the center, he turned them to the fact that, as they argued, the doctor next door, was naturally dilapidated. Hartwell later described in the testimony that he never released the growing feeling of anxiety he felt, how Henrik brought. They are deep in the area that did not provide a howling-style shelter. My wish was a box. The sudden wall led directly to the crowded people with the rage of the storm. Thomas Bergstrom. They suggested that they should return to Earth's elevation and wait for a snowstorm in the open meadow, so Henrik insisted it. Moving under such conditions is suicide. The storm breaks in the morning, guaranteed to them, her voice guaranteed, her voice. I can barely hear it in the wind. You need to keep your kids warm overnight. However, the storm did not break. Within 48 hours, the family was messy in the van, so everyone provided small protection against the wind that led the snow. Crat and crevasse. Food supply is carefully standardized for travel. It will be extended on the third day. Even more surprising, several families began to show signs of frostbite. Their best efforts to warm up. It's the second night that young Michael Brennan is already worried about him. Military experience began to notice contradictions in action. Henrik seemed to be visible while the family became increasingly desperate and shared the heat of their bodies to survive. I realized that the delays were well prepared for increased delays. He had additional food on staff. Delivery, additional fire, as he argued, gathered before the storm, and the most perplexing of all, apparently they knew exactly where the shelter was. It went through this when the call of nature became inevitable. Canyon, like he was here before. During the short lull of wind, Michael Chichota was his father. See how he progresses. Directly to this rock when he needs to do business. Without hesitation, there is no research. Patrick. Brennan, exhausted from helping to maintain the fire and take care of her young child, initially refused her son. Observation is a delusional idea that became Michael after the war. But as it was on the third day, Patrick, he began to realize things to himself. It appears that Henrik never fought with a dry fire search. The storm saturated everything in front of us. Even if he was generously divided, his personal supplies never diminished. With family members whose arrangements have expired. Henrik's response was the most surprising time of Thomas Belkram. He suggested sending a little side to find a better shelter. The guide's normal gentle behavior. Let's reveal what's cold and calculate it below. No one will leave the group, Henrik firmly said. Eventually, how? This is separated from the party. I've seen it happen many times. When Dr. Hartwell proposed to accompany the scout part, mentioning responsibility for pregnant Rebecca and other vulnerable members. The response of this group, Henrik, was even more surprising. Doctor, you need it here. Plus, I am the only person who knows well enough to safely concentrate these bad lands. Trust me, I'm being led by my family. The worst case scenario. Henrik's confidence was a matter of what he specifically chose this path. Labels that completely avoid bad land. The contradiction was not lost. About people who still fought clearly despite the cold and hunger. On the fourth morning, Henrik did that. Announcement of continuing survivors for the rest of their lives. He said he noticed the smoke. Distance is probably another traveler's party, or perhaps a trapper's lounge where they can find shelter. He'll be like that. The scouts are ahead, he said. And we'll be back in 6 hours on news. Keep the fire. He asked, as he burned and stayed next to the wagon. If it doesn't return to sunset, send 3 smoke signals. I'll find you. Henrik leaves his horse and wears only light packaging and his rifle. The fact that he didn't say. The family said he was heading towards Kesh, the supplies he had hidden the previous fall. A delivery. To support him comfortably while he waits while nature removes witnesses in his next crime. My family has never seen it. Henrik Olsen again. At sunset on the 4th day, they burned carts and saved them by storing enough heat. The children are alive. On the morning of the 5th day they faced something terrible. The choices for the rest of the site and the hopes or refusal of their guides to return. The attempt to reach civilization on foot in the wagon and snow was deep in my chest. Martha Lindfist, a main member of the party, made the decision that made its destiny. He can't come back, she said. The brutal integrity of a man who has experienced 70 years of humanity. Something happened to him. She didn't finish this idea, but everyone understood what it means. They decided to wait another day. Henrik Olsen returned to Fort Buford on February 19. He crossed the territorial community along the Missouri River. Immediately trip over the door. Dawn, frostbit, inconsistent, he collapsed in front of the commander. And the words recorded in official reports and declared for decades to repeat themselves in whispering conversations. Come. They all left. Wolf. Dear God, Wolf. The story told Henrik. As soon as he recovered enough to give him a series of reports written as a tragic hero who seemed helpless. The way nature sacrificed the lives of 23 innocent people. His testimony states that the storm was worse. Everything he knows more than 5 years of parts through the territory of Dakota. Despite all the effort. Find shelters and support morale. The extension of the cold weakened the group so much that they became easy prey. For a flock of wolves exiled from normal hunting for the same storm. I tried to fight. They demonstrated. Henrik sobbed and sang James McClelland's territorial sources. Common tears and wounds in his hands that appeared according to his history. But there were so many people. They were too weak to run. Girl Belkstrom, dear Christ, sounds from afar. Henrik's account contained precise details about the progression of the storm. And according to him, the individual heroism acts that became witnesses when the family tried to protect both selves. Wolf elements and attacks. He moved Dr. Hartwell. The final point probably spent on the injured, even when the wolves surrounded the group in Thomas Bergstrom. Use the final stand, the broken wheels of the car, as a weapon to protect your daughter. A. The story was persuasive, tragic, and completely reliable for those who witnessed the territorial capabilities of Dakota. Because of sudden, ruthless violence. Marshall McReynolds, Indian veterans himself. The countryside and the prairie-like snowstorm were nothing found in Henrik's history. A quick disaster can cause conflicts with isolated travelers. More importantly, Henrik. Foreign evidence supporting his claim. The leather bags he compressed when he arrived at Fort Batford were included exactly. The amount of money that families suffer. Their savings were combined for purchase of consumables and payment for submission of requests. Succession complaints tool. Henrik explained that he intentionally raised money for his body. Make sure he reached the parents of the Eastern family, rather than the concentration of garbage that can be detected. Tragedy. It seemed like I could do it for them, Henrik said. Thomas. Ultimately, Belkstrom promised that I would look at his family's savings and return to my brother at Milloy. The rest, they asked for the same thing. That was everything I could do for them. A. Territorial authorities organized a recovery expedition a few days after Henrik's return, but at the end of February. Thor traveled with dangerous people and restricted searches for sections available to horses. When the team returned in the area a week later, saying they discovered dispersed evidence of the tragedy, waste. Clothes, broken parts, disrupted snow. It could be a view of wolves' attacks, but it has no body. Marshall McReynolds explained that there are no ruins in terms of meaning for all people who know about border life. Wolves don't leave much, especially when they desperately need heavy winters. Dahmer has. He erased the fact that he missed the package. Henrik Olsen officially removed the crime and congratulated him. Survival skills and their efforts to follow the victim's final wishes. He used his family's savings to buy his own inheritance. They lost their pioneering by creating a prosperous farm that they dreamed of building. 6 weeks of Henrik's story. He was definitely held. He entered his new fortune and began planning the spring. Where the land, talk to the territorial newspaper and create guidance services. Proper security and preparation for a trip to the meadows. Residents presented Henrik as an example of tragedy. This can inspire a person to create something important to the loss. Then Ezra Kowarski discovered it. Kowarski. He was a Polish immigrant, spent 3 years catching mines along the tributaries of Bobrov and Small People. Missouri River. Unlike the farmers and cities who accepted Henrika. In history, Kowarski had an intimate knowledge of how wolves and people were guided by Dakota Beck. More. It is important to note that it was in the area during the February storm. The sample did not match what actually happened. According to a trap passing through a distant canyon, about 40 fish. Miles at Henrik's site claimed tragedy, and Kowarski discovered what was there. Later, it is explained in territorial court documents as evidence of human housing incompatible with urgency. Shelter. Someone hidden under a stone overhang protected from wind and snow. He built a complex camp with enough supplies to support multiple people over the course of weeks. Camp. They set fire to objects clearly placed before the storm. Dry fire cut and folded accurately. Lines, materials and largest materials for barred canvas, designed for large-scale use. Everything is a food cache that goes beyond what makes a wise leadership. It will wear out for emergency use. Someone prepared the site not as a random discovery, but as a deliberate shelter. More. The personal things Kowalski discovered were scattered across camps and always needed. Middle of the child. Initial AB, female HPIL style, Swedish immigrants like. TB, Thomas Bergstrom / pocket watch of man engraved. Initial. When Kowalski discovered Marshall McReynolds, territorial authorities faced a terrible opportunity. The story of Henrik Olsen. Heroic survival can be carefully considered by fiction designed to cover crimes that challenge everything they thought of. He knew the limits of tragedy and human nature. Subsequent investigation. The contradictions in Henrik's story are more surprising for each part of the evidence. Marshal McReynolds. Accompanied by a small batch of territorial judges and lawmakers of William Hartfield. We have conducted detailed inspections of hidden camps and began comparing important evidence to official reports. Tragedy. The first serious divergence included a calendar. Henrik insisted. The storm captured her party 4 days before the wolf attack. However, delivery is cashed out. The hidden camp provided preparations for a much longer stay. Fire only. Days presented for cuts and poses that were not possible during Henrik's storm. The location itself was even more important. Henrik explained. Find shelter in the canyon of the box. This provided minimal protection for the elements. If he did not have a hidden pattern to lead the group to this, then illogical for an experienced guide. Position. On the contrary, the hidden camp was in an ideal shelter. Those who have sincerely wanted to protect 23 people from the snowstorm would have obvious choices. Judge Hartfield. Ohio prosecutors have been appointed to attract Eastern legal norms to territorial justice. I ordered a more complete search in this area. What his team discovered portrayed an increasingly ominous image. February's tragedy. After traces of Henrik connecting camp hidden in the site he described as the scene of the wolf attacks, investigators found evidence that someone had made several trips between the two locations. And after the storm. Footprint. Anyone with the type of heavy boots that Henrik loved suggested that he followed this path at least 6 times. In a few days. On the official website of Tragedy, I have identified the details more carefully. The history of the last hopeless position on the wolves was contradictory. Dispersed details of the station wagon were found in the program. This suggested deliberate dismantling rather than destruction of desperate people looking for fire. Personal. They were distributed to show a systematic search rather than a confusion of wolves' attacks. The worst was detecting objects that Henrik did not mention in his first indication. Investigators are hidden beneath a pile of stones, and investigators discover a collection of values. Trullery. Jewelry, additional money, certified documents. It was much richer than Henrik's story. Rebecca Hartwell wore her grandmother's silver medallion. The equivalent of $50, a significant amount that Henrik couldn't include in him. Report on collections of victims. The Kobarski brothers dragged rail wages with money. Belts containing over $300 are much larger than Henrik's rendered. Authorities. Thomas Bergstrom brought not only family savings but also a collection of inherited gold coins. His father. Evidence suggests that Henrik Olsen stole his family before allowing him. They die. However, evidence of intentional murder had to be understood exactly how 23 people were killed. The situation where their guides were comfortable surviving. Marshal McReynolds led to a doctor. Charles Whitman, a territorial doctor who investigated Henrik after returning to Fort Buford. Dr. Whitman. The initial review supported Henrik's story. Management shows signs of frost effects and consistent effects in the surviving blizzard. However, when asked to revise his conclusions in light of new evidence, Dr. Whitman. He admitted that Henrik's injuries were surprisingly sweet to those who claimed they spent 4 days. A violent time. The frostbite was superficial. Dr. Whitman shows. Svideb, in cold weather, you can get it in hours rather than days. And its general condition. He was. Of course, I was hungry and exhausted, but not the staff. I had high expectations of someone who knew the test he described. The investigation accepted a decisive round when it decided to seek Henrik's succession for additional evidence. What? They found that even experienced lawmakers were shocked by the route underground of their new property. This has been involved in border violence for many years. Hidden object of Henrik hidden under the seed bag. It was clearly part of a missing family. Children's clothes always smell like a heart. Hirana Bergstrom made her daughter feel special on Sunday. Includes Dr. Hartwell's medical bag. A tool that Henrik couldn't offer a purchase. Catherine Brennan's wedding pace stands out. Irish design. Her husband explained in detail while providing information about the victim. But the most surprising discovery was a detailed magazine led by Henrik in the winter of 18,889. The magazine shows that the February tragedy is not an opportunistic crime born of despair. The culmination of months of careful planning. Henrik spent a fall searching for a place. Looking for badlands, especially sites that are difficult to find and impossible to escape. He cashed in. Create a network of delivery in several locations, allowed shelters. He survived the victim comfortably. The scariest, included in the magazine. Detailed profiles of potential victims including wealth assessments. Vulnerability to their possible travel routes and operations. Keep. On December 15, 1888, they did not doubt Henrik's intentions. Bergstrom. The family interviewed today about the spring transition to the domain near Yellowstone. They carry important things. Saving money with an elderly mother who slows down economics attempts. The best candidate for the West Road through the canyon system. You need to make sure no other guidelines are available. Desired travel period. A similar memo documented the systematic elimination of Henrik / competition. Guide, it's a culture of reliability and reputation. Detailed knowledge of weather conditions that provide natural coverage of crime. The final entrance to February. On the 10th of 1889, 4 days before the start of the tragic trip, the cold was shown. It is calculated that he appears to have limited heroism. The weather report shows a solid storm system approach. From the northwest. The family tries to leave before the conditions worsen. Intention. It provides an early start and a direct route through the Badlands. With good preparation, you should be able to eliminate it. All witnesses maintain the appearance of natural disasters. Don't forget to return the reasonable part. Victim's money to avoid doubt. That's the evidence against Henrik Olsen. Overwhelming. But Marshall McClannolds faced the issue of plaguing the border for decades. How to prove murder when the body disappears, and defendant supports his innocence against. Does that seem like persuasive evidence? Henrik's defense when he meets magazines. The stolen goods then died from a heroic situation that survived the victim. The journal file is said to be manufactured by someone who tried to create it, perhaps Ezra Kowalski. He himself was able to put the evidence to receive publicly released money rewards to receive information about his disappearance. Family. This Polish viewer saw my inheritance for several weeks, Henrik. He argued for Judge Hartfield. He knows I've been successful, I know that others could start again. I faced difficulties. He probably planned this because I came back from this awful thing. Trial. Henrik's hidden money description was equally creative. She has allegedly prepared a commemorative expedition to properly bury the victims in the spring. The site is available. Delivery is designed to maintain proper burial and valuable objects found in. His possession was confident until he could find the deceased parent. I was waiting for the right. It's time for Henrik to contact the family in the East. I wanted to be able to do it. Not only can I protect them, telling them that their loved ones have been buried in Christianity. Wolf. The story was quite reliable, especially later, to raise reasonable questions. Territory court system. Investigation involving missing persons. Judge Hartfield was in an unpleasant position. Everyone was convinced of the accused guilt, but the main side of the legal standard for conviction. He remained disappointed. The breakthrough came from the unexpected. Sauce. Michael Brennan is a young veteran whose war is broken by nerves, making him sensitive to detail. Others may lose sight of it. Territorial authorities were initially dependent on testimony. Someone's mental state is questionable, but Michael's obsession with contradictions in Henrik. History has led him to conduct his own investigations. Michael spent a few weeks. After meeting tourists and interviewing people they noticed, the route the party rented from Fort Butts Ford. Henrik's movement leads to tragedy. His perseverance found that testimony. Finally, he provides a missing link between Henrik's detailed preparation and the disappearance of the victim. Sarah, Ezra's wife, Kobarski, checked the trapline near the hidden camp on February 16, the day Henrik allegedly claimed to fight the wolves. His companions died around him. Ridge. After leaving the canyon, Sarah saw the lonely man systemically move through what he was. Become an abandoned camp, download items to the cabinet, covering traces. How did he work? I thought it was strange, people said. Work carefully, as if he didn't want to be seen. And he wasn't like someone who just had a terrible experience. Tragedy. He moved like the world. Sarah's explanation of man's clothes and horses corresponded with Henrik exactly. That's even more important, his testimony. He placed him in a hidden camp the same day he said he was fighting for survival with his family. On a temporary scale, it prevents Henrik from being in both locations and ultimately provides specific evidence. His story was wrong. But even Sarah's testimony was not sufficient. If investigators have not found themselves scared more than any evidence, make sure they are certain. They've always found it. Deputies during the last hidden search in the area around the camp. I found what looked like a shallow grave broken by a bottle. The bodies they discovered. No one fought the wolves, but there were some children who were apparently killed at the exhibition. Hungry. The physical condition suggested they were alive for several days. After Henrik said the tragedy was over, he sought help, perhaps never before. In their guide. Systematically plundered his family's property from his practical shelter. Dr. Whitman. The body showed the worst details of everything, evidence that someone had. Provides enough food and heat to save a few days for kids, but not enough to save money. Of theirs. They survived not by mercy but as a guarantee. Contrary to the possibility that researchers could arrive earlier than the expected Henrik. When we thought we saw it. All of the fears of the pasture Dakotas are intensifying. If this story gives you cool, share this video with friends who love dark puzzles. Instead of pressing a button as a button to support the content. Forget subscribing to such story mistakes. Let me open, it will happen. A. Revelation that Henrik intentionally expanded the child's suffering. An unruly murder for something is much more worrying. Family is not easy. He was thrown to die. They were systematically killed by a man who spent several months and planned their destruction. Smile and embrace your confidence. The Henrik Olsen test began on May 15, 1889. Construction of the Bismarck Territorial Court. It was supposed to be a simple case of limiting justice. A legitimate view that attracted observers from across Dakota and beyond. Eastern newspaper has been sent. Local residents responding to the response to illuminating them as sensational as trial in the case of Wolf's murder. Every day he wrapped the courtyard. Henrik has arrived. Courts will dress perfectly every morning and save worthy support that convinces 23 people. Trust in your life. Even as James prosecutor, his actions have never been broken. Mitchell systematically presented it depicted as a careful predator who prayed for his family. You are just looking for opportunities to build a new life at the border. Accusations constructed by unsecured parties. Indirect evidence of intentionality. Mitchell started. Henrik's reputation certificate and the confidence that his family has shown systematically. The heroic tales of the survivors, material evidence, evidence of evidence, and I feel sorry for the contents of Henrik magazine. The jury woman and gentleman said Mitchell in his entry statement. / proves that the accused has not survived the tragedy. He created it. It shows Henrik Olsen spending months planning a systematic murder of an innocent family. When deliberately put in danger, what he saw, how they died, when he was safe. And in comfort, count your money and plan your escape. The most effective evidence of the accusation was Dr. Whitman has remained a number of Jew appellants with medical indications for the child's condition. Shaking it. Dr. Whitman described it as a long effect in clinical detail. And hunger affects the human body, especially the children, and evidence is now visible by victims. It's much longer than Henrik's history. Based on my body research, Dr. May Whitman. / These children survived at least a week after the wolf attack was estimated. They died slowly from cold and hunger. Someone nearby had enough reserves to store them. Sarah Kobarski certificate. The most important link Henrik has placed in a hidden camp when he says he is with his dying family. His simple, direct reports on monitoring of abandoned camps systematically stolen and destroyed by the rest. Trust the Henrik event version. But that was Michael Brennan's testimony. A compelling understanding of Henrik's personality and methods. Despite his reputation for instability, Michael detailed memories of the trip and his observations of Henrik's actions portrayed the image of a man. Each aspect of the tragedy was organized. He knew exactly where to go to this canyon. Michael showed it. Despite the obvious emotional costs of experience, the voice is stable. Even during the storm he moved. The way he was there before. And when people start talking about leaving and looking for a better shelter, it's always there was a reason we had to stay in place. Still, why he was the only person who could make a decision. Michael. The story of Henrik's mysterious loss and scouts to get help, it really revealed him. The final step in his plan. As soon as Henrik left the family, they were behind everything. Hope of salvation. In the trap where he explained in New. There is no delivery and knowledge about how to survive on bad land. Protection. Counsel, Director Robert Carriel, faced a job that was almost impossible. Evidence. It was epic, and the witnesses deserved the defendant's confidence in history, and were systematically dismantled. Carroll /S. The strategy focused on the reliability of the evidence and attacks on hypotheses that Henrik was the victims of a complex framework organized by people who envied his success. My client has committed nothing. Kalila said he was made much more than he survived in a terrible tragedy. Kozlov's scapegoat of those who are unable to accept this despite all our efforts. There is no heroic survival. Wine and the burden of continuing. Live. Kalira suggested that Ezra Kobarski planted evidence of the framework. Henrik is working with other lovers who probably drew on the success of Norwegian immigration. He supported the fact that you can create a newspaper file and plant stolen items at the root of Henrika. A seller of all people who have access to his succession. The most effective time of protection came when Henrik himself took stay. In his voice, he was barely higher than the tweet. He said in horror to observe how his family dies around him. To hear the children cry for help, he couldn't make the horrific decision to save money, and he couldn't save that fact. It's not disappearing with his body, but the value of what he can do. I failed, Henrik shed tears on his face. I had to be their guide, their defender. He failed. But I am not a murderer. I'm the one to live. On the day I knew that 23 good people trusted me in their lives, I was strong enough and not fully experienced. Save them. Henrik's testimony is fascinating, and for a while, he may generate enough doubt to avoid certainty. However, Prosecutor Mitchell's mutual questioning. It systematically disrupted Henrik's credibility and forced him to explain more and more obvious contradictions. In that history. M. Olsen, asked Mitchell. If you were really locked up. While explaining the testimony of the family, Kobarski, for 4 days, she explains that she only saw you in a hidden camp. Will it be quietly loaded on the same day you said you fought the wolf? Henrik's response is Mrs. Kulwal was mistaken for part of the date or saw a way someone else wasn't persuasive. When Mitchell asks for detailed drugs at a hidden camp, Henrik's explanation. It's even more hopeless and controversial. When Henrik's fate was seized. The letter was found hidden when Mitchell came when he gave the final evidence. In Henrik's cabin, written, but will not send a call to Minneapolis. The letter of March 1, 1889 was discussed. Henrik's plan to expand commercial operations to include routes. Montana's territory has even greater potential to make profits. Dakota. This letter is not a devastating failure for Henrik to make the February tragedy. A successful test of how he planned to use again. He has already determined potential victims and explored new ones. A place for future crime. Improved ways to manage large groups in isolated areas. Letter. The key supports their confidence in the systematic exclusion of salvation and the possibilities of salvation /. The February operation reported significant benefits with minimal risk exposure. Juju is debated because there are fewer. At all times, it was more than 3 hours before the guilt was restored in the verdict. 23 fees. Deliberate murder. Judge Hartfield explained that Henrik in a temporary ruling. Olsen's crime is a slander of civilized society against its own principles. It depends on. You have betrayed the confidence of your family to see you want a better life. Judge Hartfield said. / You have planned their deaths in the cold calculations of businessmen planning a contract. You saw the kids die. Though considering your parents' money, you remained comfortable and good. There is only one suggestion for these crimes. Henrik Olsen was hanged. On September 12, 1889, he was found at Bismarck Territory Prison. According to the witness, he was innocent until the end, claiming that he became a victim of a conspiracy of a deep competitor. The revenge of immigrants who were unable to admit that the Norwegians were successful where they failed. The case is established. Legal priorities against judicial persecution in complex murder cases in territorial courts and he identified vulnerabilities in border families with predators who exploited confidence and despair. More importantly, this indicates the need for better supervision of leadership services. Survival while moving west. Areas held by 6 families. The planned facility was ultimately argued by other settlers, but no one is thriving. Locals said the land was cursed, but a more practical observer pointed out that Henrik is far away. Chosen for the victims, inadequate for agriculture and dangerously isolated from supply and medical routes. Help! Territorial governments are implementing new rules necessary. Guidelines for registering with local governments and providing links from previous customers. That's what the reward system was like. Created to report suspicious behavior among border service providers, the Territorial Origin S has been launched. Perform regular administrative checks. But the longest influence of Henrik Olsen was change. This led to the way that border families approached the decision to trust foreigners in their lives. Tragedy has destroyed the hypothesis that survival skills and professional reputation are adequate guarantees. Guide character. The family traveled and began hiring in large groups. Some manuals to confirm other decisions and establish communication time with authorities. Search for triggers if contacts are lost. Personal property restored after Henrik's money was finally sent back. Survivors of Eastern parents. The brothers of Milloy's Thomas Bergstrom established using family savings. Scholarship Fund for Children, Orphan Border Tragedy. Dr. Hartwell. The medical equipment was given to territorial hospitals, where he served the border community for over a decade. Michael Brennan, that war is damaged by nerves. He survived for years of trial. Eventually, he himself became the source of the territory, specializing in investigating suspicious losses and lost funds. His detailed message about Henrik Olsen's investigation has become mandatory for police reading. The whole Dakota Ezra Kowalski, Snotnik, Discovery. Henrik disclosed the crime and waived all awards proposed by the territory. Government. He continued to use the trapline along the Petit Missouri River. When the neighbors discovered the bodies of these children, he reported that he was never the same. Sarah Kowalski later said that her husband might wake up in the middle of the night and that he is sure he can hear children cry in the wind. The view of Henrik's hidden camp becomes a kind of monument among catchers. A hunter who worked in a bad land. Local legends believe that anyone who sets up a camp there will hear the sound of the kids playing. Distance. Investigators who studied these reports revealed that wind could explain it. Acoustic characteristics of the canyon system. There was a more surprising message to your others. Delivery far from the territory. Territories for the next 10 years. Authorities have discovered at least 6 other sites. Zone No one included evidence of the crime, but their presence suggested that Henrik Olsen probably wasn't. Only among border guides that have seen potential customer vulnerabilities. The file of the case remained sealed until 1923, when historian Dr. Margaret Lindholm was access when studying border crime for his doctoral dissertation. Lindholm's Ph.D. He showed that Henrik's methods were far more refined than judicial persecution. He was managing a fatal program at least 3 years before the tragedy of 1889. And perhaps he was responsible for the disappearance of some small games, and its fate was never resolved. Henrik Olsen was a kind of border that we were just beginning to understand. Dr. Lindholm. Written in his book 1925, The Wolf in Sheep, Crime and Justice. America. He used the very qualities that made border control possible. Rely on foreigners for confidence, cooperation and survival. They commit crimes that are impossible in more regulated communities. The financial report, which withdraws from Henrik's property, revealed the entire volume of his crime business. More than 3. For years he has accumulated wealth equivalent to the fact that a businessman who thrived 10 years later can win. Using this money, I bought some real estate objects under different names, suggesting that he had planned develop operations in the western region. The scariest thing was the creation of detailed cards. He discovered that Henrik was hidden in the taxi wall during repairs in 1902. Map. The location is not just being noticed. Montana, Wyoming, and Colorado. That's how each route was. Notes are recorded on typical travel periods, seasonal weather conditions and natural shelters. This can be used as a murder. The card suggests that Henrik is planning a systematic murder campaign. This would lead to a tragedy in February 1889. The opening and subsequent research revealed that Henrik worked for years and was able to leave. The family path passed through the western border. In the case of Henrik Olsen, it became the necessary educational materials. Includes recently created territorial academies and investigation elements of law enforcement. Federal guidelines for judicial persecution of complex murder cases at border courts. Previous law. For decades, it was created during trials that affect territorial law, particularly regarding its use. Indirect evidence of crimes that failed to restore the organization and judicial persecution. But perhaps the most a key legacy of the case was the conscience he created between border families based on the dangers of the blind. Trust. The tragedy reminded me of the qualities and self-confidence that were made possible to survive the border. Ingenuity and ability to use the vulnerabilities of others to turn into criminals. The purpose is to have no moral restrictions. In the end, Henrik Olsen. History is a dark contrast to the myth of limited heroism. Goodbye. History celebrates guides, scouts, and pioneers who helped families build new lives in dangerous realms. This reminds me of those who used them among those who had the skills to survive in the desert. Innocent hunting skills. 23 victims of Henrik's presumed atrocities. Thomas and Hera Rainen Bergslum and their daughters, Dr. Samuel and Rebecca Hartwell and their children. Their dream of prosperity in Kobarski Frere in search of healing from war. A damaged son and an elderly link fist in March, she just wanted to die as a free woman. In his own land, he was represented by hopes and dreams moving west. Their deaths were helpful. A cruel reminder that Frontier's promises about freedom and possibilities came with dangers that were uncounted. Preparation can be completely eliminated. This mystery shows that the real fear of the U.S. border was not the case. It is always seen in natural disasters, Indian attacks, or wildlife. Sometimes he's in good condition. A guide to trusting with pale blue eyes and an encouragemental smile that saw others. Dreams as a potential for profit and dreams as confidence as a weakness that must be misused. What do you think? History? Do you think it's all revealed? Or maybe there are more victims of Henrik Olsen's crime, but we're still waiting. Is it located in the vast badlands of Dakota? Leave a comment below. If you like this story, you want a more horrifying story like this, sign. People who love puzzles. You will be redirected to the next video.